In the heart of a remote village, nestled deep within the dense greenery of Central Africa, far from the reach of modern cities, lived a girl named Nia. She was no older than 17, her skin the shade of dark mahogany, her eyes like deep wells of calm mystery. Nia was known in the village of Kogelo for her quiet demeanor, her uncanny intuition, and the dreams she spoke of that often came true. Some villagers whispered that she had been born with a spirit inside her. Others said she was simply gifted. Either way, there was something different about her, something that didn't sit right with everyone. Nia had grown up under the care of her grandmother, a wrinkled, sharp-eyed woman named Kogelo, who was once a traditional healer. Kogelo never taught Nia the old ways, but some knowledge had passed down anyway through observation, through instinct, through blood. While most teenagers in the village giggled and played in the fields, Nia often sat still under the baobab tree, whispering to herself or gazing into the distance. It was under that tree where she had her first vision, a terrible dream of fire and shadow, of someone who would try to destroy her. The dream clung to her like a shadow for days, then weeks. She felt its presence long after she woke, as if it had left some unseen residue in her bones. And then one day, the signs began. It started small. Her food would spoil mysteriously, even when it had just been cooked. The chickens her grandmother raised refused to go near her, squawking violently when she came too close. The air in her room at night turned thick and suffocating, the walls seemingly breathing with an unnatural rhythm. She began to lose weight despite eating well, and her skin took on a strange, dry pallor. The village healer examined her and declared there was nothing wrong. But the elders exchanged wary glances. Word spread that Nia had been cursed not by accident, but by intention. Someone in the village had used black magic against her. In many African cultures, belief in witchcraft, curses, and ancestral spirits runs deep. The people of Kogelo believed that when someone wants to harm another without touching them, they could go to a witch, often someone who operated in secret, someone feared but needed. The witch would ask for something personal, maybe a strand of hair, a piece of clothing, or even just a name whispered into the dark. Then the spell would be cast. What followed was usually slow, invisible torment, illness with no cure, paranoia, misfortune, or even death. Kogelo, though old and weary, knew this well. She had battled such darkness before. The moment she saw Nia's sunken eyes and trembling hands, she knew this wasn't mere illness. She began to prepare, collecting herbs by moonlight, drawing ancient sigils on the floor, and muttering prayers that hadn't been spoken aloud for decades. She gave Nia a charm to wear around her neck, made of bones, feathers, and a polished black stone that shimmered in strange light. But even as she fought, the curse deepened. Nia began to speak in voices not her own. Sometimes at night, she would scream words in languages even Kogelo didn't recognize. Villagers reported seeing her walking barefoot in the forest in the dead of night, her eyes open but unseeing. And once, a child swore she saw Nia levitate off the ground, her hair floating around her as if underwater. Fear spread like wildfire. The village council called a secret meeting. Some elders wanted her exiled, fearing her presence would bring ruin upon them all. Others, more compassionate but just as afraid, believed the curse could infect others. But Kogelo fought fiercely. She warned them, exile would not free them from the evil. The curse was not born of Nia, it was sent to her. Banishing her would not stop it. In fact, it could make things worse. Behind closed doors, Kogelo worked day and night to uncover who had sent the curse. She knew the signs, the ritual patterns, the energy left behind. But the witch had been careful, this was no novice. Whoever had cursed Nia had done so with great skill, hiding their tracks and cloaking their intent. Still, Kogelo was relentless. One night, under the light of a red moon, she performed a dangerous ritual to speak with the ancestors. The ritual was forbidden, a calling of spirits that demanded payment. Kogelo offered her blood and her breath. As the wind howled through the trees and the flames turned blue, the spirits whispered a name, someone close, a girl named Abeni. Abeni had once been Nia's friend. They'd grown up together, played by the river, chased fireflies. But things changed when a boy named Kogelo came into their lives. He was handsome, charming, the son of a traveling merchant. Both girls had feelings for him, but Kogelo only had eyes for Nia. At first, Abeni pretended not to care. But jealousy is a slow poison. When Kogelo asked Nia to marry him, Abeni disappeared for 3 days. When she returned, something was different. Her eyes were colder, and she stopped speaking to Nia altogether. No one knew where she had gone. But Kogelo now understood. Abeni had gone to find the witch rumored to live beyond the old hills, a woman whose face no one had seen in decades. She had asked for a curse, and she had gotten it. Confronting Abeni directly was dangerous. If she had truly bonded with the dark powers, she might strike again. But Kogelo had a plan. With Nia growing weaker by the day, her time was running out, so Kogelo prepared one final ritual, a reversal. It was risky. If done wrong, the curse could rebound onto Nia again, stronger than before. But it was the only way. The villagers gathered as Kogelo led Nia into the forest, clearing under the sacred Iroko tree. She painted Nia's body with ash and herbs, placed ritual stones in a circle, and began to chant. The air grew thick, charged with unseen electricity. As the final words were spoken, Nia collapsed. Her body shook violently. A loud crack split the air, not thunder, but something deeper, something spiritual. Suddenly, Abeni screamed from her home in the village. She collapsed, blood pouring from her nose. The curse had snapped back, breaking its tie to Nia and turning on its origin. It was over. But the cost was high. Nia lay unconscious for 3 days. When she finally woke, her eyes were clear, her skin warm again. But she was changed. Something in her had been burned away. Kogelo wept with relief, but knew it was not just her granddaughter who had returned. Something else had come back with her, something that now lived quietly inside her. Abeni, on the other hand, was never the same. Her body survived, but her mind did not. She wandered the village muttering nonsense, her eyes wide with fear at things only she could see. The villagers pitied her, but also feared her. Some said the spirits of the dead she had disturbed now haunted her. Afterward, the village treated Nia with both reverence and caution. She was no longer just a girl. She had crossed the boundary between the living and the spirit world. Some called her a survivor, others called her touched. She no longer needed to sit under the baobab tree to see visions. Now they came to her whether she wanted them or not. Years passed, and Kogelo passed on, her duty complete. Nia took her place as the village's new guardian, though she never called herself a healer. She had no apprentices, no formal rituals. She simply listened to the land, to the winds, to the spirits that whispered in dreams. And when people came to her with fear in their eyes, she told them the truth. That black magic is real, that it leaves scars. That sometimes the danger comes not from strangers, but from those who smile beside you. And most of all, that if you survive it, you are never quite the same again. Despite all that had passed, Nia never spoke of Abeni again. The village kept a quiet distance from the girl who now roamed the edges of the community like a ghost in her own skin. Children were told not to stare at her. Some whispered that at night she cried in tongues or laughed without reason. Nia herself would sometimes see Abeni from afar, sitting beneath the very tree where they had once played, her face turned up to the sky as if listening to something that no one else could hear. In those moments, Nia felt a strange pang, not hatred, not anger, but a quiet, aching sorrow for what had been lost. The days moved forward. Seasons changed. But though the sun returned to shine on Kogelo and the harvests grew rich again, something in the fabric of the village had shifted. People came to Nia not just for healing, but for guidance. They brought her broken charms, dreams they didn't understand, questions whispered through trembling lips. And she, still barely a woman, listened as though she had always been meant for this role. There were nights when she would walk into the forest alone and not return until dawn, her clothes damp with dew and her fingers coated in dark soil. No one asked her where she went, and she never told. One night, during the season of heavy rains, a stranger arrived in Kogelo. He was tall, wrapped in a brown cloak that was far too thin for the storm, his face shadowed beneath a wide-brimmed hat. He carried no bag, no walking stick, no animal, only a small wooden box bound in red string. The villagers, wary of outsiders, watched him closely as he approached Nia's home. He said no words. He simply bowed, handed her the box, and turned to walk away. Nia held the box in her lap for hours, unmoving as the storm raged around her. The rain pounded her roof like drums calling spirits. Thunder cracked like the voice of gods. Finally, just before sunrise, she cut the red string and opened the lid. Inside was a single black feather, longer than her forearm, unnaturally smooth and cold to the touch. Beneath it, a folded paper stained with something that looked like old blood. She unfolded it carefully and saw a symbol, one she recognized immediately. It was the mark of the Abero. The Abero were whispered legends, even among the most secret of healers and mystics. Said to be a hidden sect of spiritual assassins, they were rumored to possess the knowledge of the oldest magics, those that predated even language. Some said they could call the wind to kill. Others believed they walked between the realms of the living and the dead like a person walking across a stream. Their symbol, the feather and the circle of blood, was feared because it meant a debt had been called. Someone, somewhere, had invoked the Abero, and now Nia had been marked. The days that followed were tense. Nia did not speak of the box. She buried the feather beneath the baobab tree, whispering a protection prayer with every handful of earth. But at night, her dreams twisted into nightmares again. She saw fire and shadow, eyes with no whites, faces without mouths. A hand reaching out of the dark, not to hurt her, but to offer something. Power, knowledge, a trade, and then came the calling. 3 nights after the box, Nia woke to find a circle of white stones arranged perfectly around her house. Each stone was etched with a symbol she did not recognize, but she felt them in her blood, ancient, dangerous, alive. That morning, her reflection in the river did not move when she did. It stared at her, unblinking, and slowly smiled. Makulu had once warned her. The deeper you go into the spirit world, the more it remembers you. You step into it once, it leaves a footprint, but step in again and you leave behind pieces of yourself. Nia understood then. The breaking of Abeni's curse had not just been a battle, it had been a door. And now that it had been opened, something had looked through. That evening, she returned to the forest, not to hide, but to seek. She called upon her ancestors, upon the old gods that slumbered in the stones and trees. She smeared her hands with ash, painted her chest with river mud, and sang the forbidden songs her grandmother had locked away in silence. The air around her shimmered, then split. She stood not in the forest anymore, but in a place between. The sky was gray and low, the ground wet with black water. Whispers circled her like wind. Shapes moved at the edge of her vision, some human, some not. And from the dark, a figure emerged, tall, hooded. Its face was hidden, but she felt its gaze like ice pressing against her soul. It held the same box. It opened it once more. This time, the feather inside was white. The figure spoke without moving its mouth. "You have been chosen, not cursed." Nia did not understand. The figure continued, "You were not the target. You were the gate." In that moment, realization fell over her like a shroud. The curse Abeni had asked for, it had not simply been a petty act of revenge. It had been a trigger, a ritual. She had been used to open a path. Something had used Abeni's jealousy, her desperation, to anchor itself through Nia. And in breaking the curse, Nia had done what no spell could do. She had invited it in fully. The figure offered her a choice. Accept the role, become the guardian not just of her village, but of the threshold between worlds, or refuse, and be consumed by the very thing that now watched her from the shadows of her soul. She chose. When Nia awoke, the forest was quiet, the air still. But something had changed. Her eyes no longer blinked in fear. Her voice carried weight that made birds fall silent. She had taken on the mantle, not of a healer, but of a keeper. The villagers began to speak of her not as a girl, but as something else. The woman who walks with 2 shadows. The daughter of bone and breath. She no longer attended to small sicknesses or love charms. Her purpose had become bigger, stranger. She watched the border between the world of the living and the restless dead. When a child became possessed, she was called. When someone vanished into the trees and returned speaking in riddles, she was summoned. Years passed. Nia grew older, but her face did not. Her voice remained the same. The mark of the Abero never returned, but she felt them always nearby, in the wind, in the reflection of her eyes. The feather, once buried, sometimes appeared at her doorstep again. Always black, always clean. A reminder. No one dared curse another in the village after that. Fear can teach where wisdom fails. Abeni eventually wandered away. One morning, she was gone. Some say she walked into the hills to find the witch who had once helped her, hoping to reverse what had been done. Others say the spirits finally took her, her debt paid in full. But Nia never looked for her. She knew that some stories must be left untold. Now, when people from other lands pass through Kogelo, they hear strange tales of a woman who does not age, who lives near the old baobab, and who speaks to things no one else can see. They do not believe them, of course. Just village stories, they say. But those who have stayed too long in the village know the truth. They've seen the way the shadows move near her home, how animals watch her from the tree line without blinking, how sometimes, when the moon is full, the wind carries a voice not quite her own. And on nights when the rain does not stop, when lightning breaks the sky like cracked bone, the villagers sleep with charms under their pillows and salt at their doors. Because they remember. They always remember. What happens when black magic is cast may not end with the breaking of a curse. Sometimes, it's only the beginning. The hills were colder than she remembered. The grass no longer bent for her feet the way it had when she was a child, and the sky above these ancient stones seemed lower, as if pressing her down with every breath she took. Abeni had wandered far since that night the curse had recoiled and shattered her mind like glass beneath a boot. People thought she had been lost, and perhaps she had, for a while. But even broken minds remember the way home when the soul is not done with its journey. There were gaps in her memory, large holes in time where faces bled together and days disappeared like mist. She remembered voices, laughter, a girl with fire in her eyes. She remembered jealousy so sharp it tasted like metal. And she remembered the old woman in the hills, the witch with skin like cracked clay and eyes like coals left smoldering after midnight prayers. That was where the true descent began. Abeni had gone to her not in rage, but in pain. She wanted to be seen, to be loved, to matter. But she'd been willing to pay a cost she did not understand. And now, years later, she walked again toward that cursed place, not for vengeance, not for power, but for answers. Abeni was not the same girl who had begged for a spell. Her body bore the marks of spirits she did not invite. Her tongue spoke words in dreams she couldn't recall while awake. At night, her hands moved on their own, sketching strange symbols in the dirt, on trees, even on her own skin. Something still lived inside her, and she could feel it, an ember from the fire she had once lit. The old witch was waiting. She had not aged. She sat in the same carved chair, surrounded by bones and jars of thick, unmoving liquids. Her hut smelled of old smoke and forgotten time. Abeni stood in the doorway, not speaking, her breath shallow. The witch raised her eyes slowly, and a twisted smile played across her lips. "So," she said, voice like stone dragging over stone, "the little bird returns." Abeni said nothing. She knelt. "I didn't understand," she whispered. "I didn't know what it would become." The witch chuckled, dry and humorless. "They never do. Jealousy is a blindfold, not a mirror." Abeni looked up. "There's still something in me. It speaks, it waits." The witch leaned forward, bones cracking under her robes. "Yes, because you were not just a vessel, you were a key. You opened something. That door remains. It will remain until you close it, or until it claims you completely." Abeni's heart pounded in her chest. She remembered the visions, the mirror that didn't reflect her, the trees that whispered her name. She remembered Nia's face, the moment the curse broke, the pain that split her mind open like a coconut. And more than anything, she remembered the shadow, the thing she had invited in without knowing, the thing that hadn't come for Nia but through her. "I want to fix it," Abeni said. The witch's laughter was sudden and sharp, echoing off the hut walls. Fix it. You want to mend what was never meant to be whole. Foolish girl, the spirit world does not work in terms of guilt and apology. You don't fix. You either feed it or you face it. Abeni clenched her jaw. Then let me face it. A long silence passed. The witch stared at her as if measuring the weight of her soul. Then, slowly, she stood and walked to a dark corner of the hut. She pulled out a bundle wrapped in dried leaves and opened it to reveal a mask carved of black wood, inlaid with teeth that did not come from any known animal. Its eyes were hollow, and its surface seemed to pulse faintly, as if breathing. "This mask will take you to the between," the witch said. "It is not a dream, and it is not death. It is what lies under both. If you face it there, you may return whole, or you may not return at all." Abeni took the mask with trembling hands. It was colder than ice. That night, under a moonless sky, she placed the mask on her face and lay down upon the sacred stones that circled the hilltop. The world peeled away. She fell for what felt like hours, not through space, but through time, through memory, through every wrong thing she had ever done, every thought she had tried to bury. When she landed, she was in a world of ash and water. Nothing had color. Shapes drifted past her, whispering things she could almost understand, and at the center of it all was the shadow. It had no face, but she knew it had once worn hers. "You called me," it said without voice. "You fed me, you let me in." "I didn't know," Abeni replied. "I did," it said. "I saw your heart. I tasted your envy. You were mine before you even spoke the words." Abeni stood tall despite her fear. "I'm not yours anymore," the shadow laughed, and the ash around them twisted like smoke. "You think you are stronger now? You who ran from the pain you caused. You who broke a friend to feel whole?" Tears stung her eyes, but she did not look away. "I was weak, but I am not running now." And then she did what she had never done before. She forgave herself. She whispered it aloud, again and again, like a chant. And with each repetition, the shadow flickered. Cracked, screamed, the ground split. Light poured in. She awoke on the stones, mask broken beside her, body trembling. The witch stood over her, silent. Abeni rose slowly, the weight of years lifted. The voice inside her was gone. The markings had faded from her skin, but she was not empty. She had brought something back, not darkness, but understanding. She thanked the witch and walked down the hill, not toward the village, but into the forest. She knew now what she had become. Not a cursed girl, not a lost soul. A protector. One day she would return to Kogelo, not to ask forgiveness, but to stand beside Nia. Two women forged by shadow, tempered by pain. Different paths, same fire. And when the next whisper came in the night, when another cursed child stumbled toward the edge of madness, there would be not just one shadow keeper in the world, but two. And this time, they would be ready. Years had passed since the curse, since the forest, since Abeni faced her shadow and returned from the between. The village of Kogelo had changed quietly, like water carving stone. Children who once ran from Nia's presence now left small offerings of flowers and trinkets at the base of her baobab tree. Strangers came occasionally, drawn by whispers, dreams, stories that crossed rivers and borders. They came looking for healing, for answers, for protection. Most left without truly understanding what they had found, but the ones who stayed too long always came back changed. Some walked with limps they never had before. Others spoke to no one for days. A few disappeared into the hills and never returned. And still, Nia remained, silent, watching. In her dreams, something stirred. It had begun again, not the same darkness, but a tremor underneath the surface, like the quiet breath of something waiting to wake. Nia felt it first in her bones, like a memory that didn't belong to her. Then in her spirit, as her grandmother's voice whispered warnings from the dead. She saw shapes forming in the mist during her forest walks, birds circling where there should be none. And one night, beneath a full moon that seemed too close to the earth, she saw footprints around her home that hadn't been there the day before, burned into the soil, not left by any living being. It was not another curse. It was a calling. The door that had once opened through her had never fully closed. The rituals, the fights, the pain, they had sealed it for a time, but power that old, once awakened, never truly sleeps. It only waits. And now it was looking again, searching not for a gate but a vessel. One it had not yet touched, something new. That same week Abeni returned. She did not walk into Kogelo as the girl who had fled it. She moved like someone who had known both death and rebirth. Her hair was longer, braided with shells, her eyes calm but sharp. The villagers froze when they saw her. They remembered. But this time, she was not alone. The forest seemed to move with her. And when she came to Nia's home, there were no words, only a quiet look, a shared nod, and a sense that time itself had looped and brought them back to the beginning. They knew why they had both been summoned. They didn't speak of it, but the signs were clear. In the days that followed, animals began leaving the forest. The birds no longer sang in the morning. Crops wilted without explanation, and children woke screaming from dreams of fire and blood. A strange symbol appeared carved into the bark of every tree along the old forest path, a spiral within a spiral, pulsing faintly at night. Nia and Abeni knew it was no longer just a threat to one person. This time, it was reaching wider, hungrier. The veil between the worlds had thinned too much, and something ancient had found a crack to pour through. They prepared the village, but not with fear, with truth. Nia spoke to the elders. Abeni walked house to house, placing salt and ash in every corner. Together, they built a circle of protection, using forgotten rites that only the two of them could carry. It was not just a ward, it was a final stand. And then came the night. The sky turned red before sunset. The wind died completely. Fires would not light. The air became heavy, pressing down like invisible hands on every chest. The village was silent. Everyone remained indoors. Only Nia and Abeni stood outside within the center of the protective circle, and from the forest, it came. It had no body, but it had formed a swirling mass of black smoke and bone, with faces flickering in and out of its shape. It screamed without sound, moaned without breath. It was not just a spirit, not just a curse, it was all the pain ever unleashed by forgotten magic, all the fear, all the unanswered cries. It was ancient, endless, but Nia and Abeni had faced it before pieces of it, shadows of its will. This time they were ready. This time, they carried more than protection spells. They carried each other. They linked hands and spoke not just the chants of the old ways, but words born from truth, forgiveness, strength, purpose. They did not fight the spirit with hate or violence. They offered it what it had never known, understanding, completion. They allowed it to pass not into a victim, but into peace. The ground shook. Light burst from the circle, not bright, but soft like the last glow of a dying star. The spirit screamed once, and then it was gone, truly gone. Silence followed, long, breathless. Then the wind returned, birds sang again, and far in the distance the trees seemed to bow as if relieved. Nia collapsed. Abeni caught her. They had done it, not just stopped a curse, not just survived a wound, they had closed the door. Fully, finally. The villagers emerged slowly, blinking at the stars now visible again. They found the two women in the center of the field, holding each other in quiet, exhausted triumph. For the first time in many years, they were not feared. They were embraced. From that day on, Nia and Abeni became not myth, not monsters, but legend. The keepers of the veil. The ones who ended the curse cycle. And as they grew older, they passed their knowledge not through rituals and fear, but through stories, through listening, through truth. No more curses were cast in Kogelo after that. Not because the people were afraid, but because they had learned, and far beyond the village, beyond even the hills and the rivers, the forest slept. Peace had returned for good, and the shadows, at last, were quiet.